Hi everyone, my name is Adrienne Jackson. Mrs. Gibson asked me to come talk to your class today and share with you my experience being an engineer. I know this week you guys are having quite the STEM event, sharing some of your projects and learning about different STEM fields. And I'm really excited to talk to you today to share my experience and background as an engineer and what it's taken for me to get here, things that I work on, and what kind of things that I do from day to day, just to give you guys a better idea of what it's like to be an engineer and what an engineer does and who engineers are. And yeah, I'm really happy to talk to you about it. But before I start, I do want to apologize. I was hoping to be there in person today, but unfortunately, I'm serving jury duty. I thought before I talk about myself, I would share a little bit about how in jury duty this week, I'm actually encountering a number of other interesting STEM fields that you might be interested in. So I thought I would share a little bit about that first. So, as a juror on the case, I get to listen to different witnesses share things relevant to what's happening. And so I've been able to hear testimony from a number of different exciting experts in different STEM fields. So, for example, I've gotten to hear about the work of a criminal toxicologist, and that's someone who works in a forensics lab and takes samples to determine the presence of drugs or alcohol, potentially biological samples or inert samples, and does testing in the lab or in the field. And these are people that support, different investigations, either by CIS or from this different cases and criminal investigations. And it's really inspiring to see the work that they do. These people, they started their career by getting a degree in biology, and then from there had an interest in criminal justice, and then found themselves in that field. So if biology or chemistry is something that's interesting to you, maybe consider looking into things that you can do in criminology. Anyway, that's not something that often comes up, but I thought I would share that you can find STEM careers all over the place. You're encountering them every day, and you may not realize it. So if you're interested in science, technology, engineering, math, biology, there's things all around that require all of those skills and all of those interests. So for me personally, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a chemist, that's not my background. So it was fascinating for me to learn about those things. But my background is in aeronautical engineering, and I went to school to learn about, I went to college to learn about how air moves over airplanes, over rockets, in how air moves in the atmosphere. All those things are related. After, how did I decide to do that, or how did I get there? So I've always been interested in flying things. As a child, I was always excited about airplanes and seeing them fly, and always interested in what was going on with NASA and the space shuttle launching, and that always really fascinated me and was something that inspired me my whole life. So, for example, in high school, I got some hobby rocket kits, and I like to launch rockets, and I loved doing water bottle rockets in my science class at school. Those were all things that were really exciting and fun, and that's how I got drawn to the field of aeronautical engineering. the things that allowed me to do that was that, um, and why I considered engineering as a profession was because, when I was in high school, I realized that I was pretty good at math and I liked it. I ended up being a tutor for some of the other students in my class. Um, I wasn't always great at school. But it took me a long time to figure out what I was good at. And, it wasn't really until high school that I started, getting good grades in math. Um, and that's what allowed me to continue and get my degree in engineering. So, um, if math is something that's interesting to you, maybe engineering is an interesting career choice for you. Um, what do you do as an engineer? So, I mean, there's so many different kinds of engineering. There's mechanical engineering, where you're designing mechanisms, you're designing vehicles, you're designing products, all different shapes, sizes, scales. There's structural engineering, people who design bridges and buildings. They work with architects, who make the building beautiful, but they're the ones who are really deciding whether or not that can survive an earthquake and what materials to use. In fact, there are material engineers who, specialize in understanding the strength of different kinds of materials and composites. They're the ones who figured out the Gorilla Glass is the best for your iPhone. Um, then there are chemical engineers, and these are people who work for pharmaceutical companies to make different drugs or vaccines. And then there are electrical engineers, and that's something that I actually learned a lot more about after college and where my career has gone. And these are people who design circuit boards, and they're the ones who design computers. They design, or they could operate at different scales and work on things like the power grid. So um, after college, I actually did work on utility scale power, and I was really interested in renewable energy and learning about solar power. And it was at that job where I learned a lot about solar panels and about electricity and power electronics and batteries. And that experience is what helped me get my job eventually at SpaceX. And that's where I spent most of my career so far, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about some of the things that I did at SpaceX. So, there I was responsible for the electrical power systems on the rockets and on the spacecraft that SpaceX designs. Um, I would say my biggest project that I worked on was the SpaceX Crew Dragon vehicle. And so that's the spacecraft that launches astronauts to the International Space Station. And I worked on that project from when it was just a napkin sketch, just an idea, a request for proposal from NASA, all the way until it launched and successfully docked with the International Space Station. And I did the design work for the electrical power system and supported the testing of that design once we had prototypes, and on finally to do the operations when we actually flew it for the first time to the space station. So I have a couple of videos here that I can share with you just to give you a better idea of what that looks like. So, I had pulled up forensic toxicology to make sure I knew what that was. But here, I'm going to make this full screen and share this video.
This is a fantastic view of Dragon in the sunlight from the International Space Station. So normally when we're getting views from the Dragon for this webcast, you're going to be seeing a camera that's not quite on the center line, so it's a little bit off, and it may not look like we're heading directly towards the docking adapter, but
So let me make sure that you can see this. Um, so here we have the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and that is the spacecraft that I worked on while I was there. Let me keep playing the video a little bit. Um,
If we're lucky enough, we might get some views from the centerline camera in the very center hatch from the space station, and you can see us
there we go.
right in. But right now,
Oops.
this is an unbelievable view from a space station. You can
Go
see
back.
space station, and you can see us kind of headed on right in. But right now, this is.
All right. Well, let's see if I can just move it back a little bit. There we go. Yeah, you can see it a bit better there. So the part of the spacecraft that I worked on were these solar panels on the outside of the Dragon spacecraft. And I also worked on the battery that's inside of this capsule, and all of the wires and power electronics that distribute power to all the things inside of the spacecraft. So, when people sometimes ask me what I worked on at SpaceX, I say, well, I helped keep the lights on in space because of the electrical power on the spacecraft powered everything on the spacecraft, from the thrusters to the oxygen tanks to the display panels to the lights. Everything that was inside of the spacecraft needed electrical power, and so I had to know about everything that required power on the spacecraft. It was a really interesting and pretty difficult problem because we were attaching the solar panels onto the side of the spacecraft. A lot of designs have solar panels that just stick out of the sides. In fact, I think if there's a view, here's a good view of the International Space Station, maybe. Yeah. These big rectangles here, those are the solar panels on the International Space Station. So they're big flat plates that point at the sun. But our little spacecraft had those tiny little squares, and they're all at different angles. Here's another picture. They're all at different angles, so at any given time, only a few of them are going to be pointed at the sun. Anyway, I really enjoyed working on that, and was really proud of it finally docking to the space station. And like I said, I worked on it from its initial concepts all the way through this first flight. And where was I on this first flight? Well, here's a picture of the two different control rooms. On the left-hand side, we have the Mission Control Center in Houston. This is NASA's control room where they're talking to the astronauts, and the mission operators working in this room control the International Space Station. They're the ones that are controlling where those solar rays point and all the different things that are required to keep the International Space Station operational, and all the day-to-day activities and mission events that happen on the space station. On this right-hand side, you can see the SpaceX Mission Control Center. And these are all the people who are working on making sure the SpaceX Dragon capsule is operating the way it's supposed to, so it can finally dock to the International Space Station. So where am I? I'm here in the second row. This is that same day, that same flight where we're doing that first docking attempt to the space station. I'm here at the end wearing this shirt with big stars on it. And I was working on, as a mission operator, making sure that the electrical power system was nominal. We didn't have any faults in the system. And the really critical event for us is docking. So like I mentioned, those little panels on the outside of Crew Dragon. Only a few of them are pointed to the sun at any given time. And so as we're flying to the International Space Station, the batteries are getting more and more discharged. So once we finally dock with the International Space Station, I'll show another picture of it. Then we have to plug in. And so these huge solar panels on the International Space Station, we let those recharge the spacecraft. So once the spacecraft is finally docked to the International Space Station, it's pretty small in comparison. It's it's like the size of some of these small bumps on the side of it. And so as we're traveling, over days to get to the International Space Station, the batteries are getting more and more discharged. And then finally, when you get plugged into the space station, my job was to make sure that those batteries were getting recharged by the power bus on the International Space Station. And that flow of power was the amount that we needed to recharge to make sure that all the systems on our spacecraft were healthy. While we were docked at the International Space Station. So that was my role. Anyway, I guess all of this to say is that just based on, an interest in math and an interest in airplanes and things like that, you can end up being part of something really amazing. I played a small role in this huge project, designing a brand new spacecraft, going to the International Space Station, docking with it for the first time, and then eventually flying astronauts back to the International Space Station. I played a small piece in that and just focused on one small aspect of that flight. But, following my interest and playing to my strengths, I was able to be a part of something like that. And you might also find yourself in that situation. So consider what things that you like to do and what things interest you, and you might find yourself in a STEM career without even realizing it. Not everyone has to be like a doctor, or not everyone needs a PhD to do something in STEM, and you can find whatever is right for you. So I've really enjoyed talking to everyone here today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you had fun learning a little bit about criminal toxicologists and a little bit about aerospace engineering and the Dragon spacecraft and solar panels. And I hope you have a really great rest of your week, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have for me. Mrs. Gibson would very happily put me in touch with you, and let me know if you have any more questions or thoughts about working in engineering. So thanks again, everyone, and we had a really great time talking to you.